history lesson. The Civil War ended in 1865, and by the late 1860s, Americans in various towns and cities had begun holding springtime tributes to fallen soldiers by decorating their graves with flowers and reciting prayers. Once formalized, it was known as Decoration Day. The date changed a couple of times, from May 5th to May 30th. Eventually, businesses began closing for the day, and graves were decorated with flags and flowers. Memorial Day, as Decoration Day gradually came to be known, originally honored only those lost while fighting in the Civil War. But during World War I, the holiday evolved to commemorate American military personnel who died in all wars. It eventually further evolved, although not officially so, to become a day to honor military personnel killed in battle and to remember family members who had passed as well. For decades, Memorial Day continued to be observed on May 30th, the day selected for the first Decoration Day. But in 1971, we changed every holiday we could to a Monday. The 3-day weekend was born, and Memorial Day became an official federal holiday. My paternal grandmother never let go of the Decoration Day moniker. Every Decoration Day, the family would assemble in her small town on the Colorado Plains to make the pilgrimage to the stark and dusty cemetery where she, and only she, would remove the remnants of the previous year's flowers from every family grave and replace them with fresh ones. There was a good deal of weeping and wailing. She had a flair for the dramatic, and weeping and wailing was her forte. Afterwards, we would return in our funeral-like procession to her tiny house, where the picnic tables in the backyard would be spread with twice as much food as we could possibly eat, and we would spend the day together laughing and swapping stories as families do. No more weeping and wailing. As a kid, it was kind of surreal. Memorial Day itself, and the newly minted 3-day Memorial Day weekend, became less a day for remembrance, but rather one for family and friends, for barbecues and celebrating the first official day of summer, for catching the middle of the annual blowout Memorial Day sale that started 3 weeks ago and will end just before the annual blowout 4th of July sale at the local furniture store. But it is worth remembering that Memorial Day has its roots in honoring those who gave their lives to protect our country from adversaries or in other wars while fighting under the banner of the Stars and Stripes. I have been reading Rachel Maddow's 2012 book, Drift, The Unmooring of American Military Power. And if that doesn't give you enough of a flavor as to where she's going, the rear cover note will. We've drifted away from America's original ideals and become a nation weirdly at peace with perpetual war. Once upon a time, when our soldiers went to war, the nation went to war. In the Civil War and in World Wars I and II, young men lied about their ages in order to enlist, to prevent the dividing of our country in two, or to protect it from becoming part of a foreign regime that was in absolute opposition to everything our Constitution and our nation's principles stood for. My husband's great-grandfather enlisted as a drummer boy in the Civil War at the age of 13. He came out 2.5 years later, having turned 16. He spent 6 months at home and re-enlisted. He served for a year, during which time he grew 10.5 inches taller. My father was a first lieutenant in World War II at the age of 19. World War II marked the first time women went to work in all kinds of jobs that opened up because of the war. Everyone sacrificed, went without things they were very used to having. My children still prefer the chocolate cake that I learned to bake from my mother, which used no eggs, no milk, and no butter, a World War II recipe. The entire nation went to war. And when we won, the entire nation won. Then something changed. The Constitution grants the Congress the power to declare war. The last time they did it was World War II. So, for those of you keeping a list of the things Congress doesn't do anymore, you can add that one. Every war since then has been via a resolution or an authorization, giving the president specific power to take necessary measures. More on that in a minute. I would love to go on at length about the Vietnam War, about President Johnson's decision to widen the draft pool and extend enlistments rather than face the firestorm which would result from calling up the reserves. About how in 1969, after watching the television coverage of the wedding of Julie Nixon to David Eisenhower, John Fogerty of Creedence Clearwater Revival wrote the song Fortunate Son. Everyone knew what he was talking about. But this reflection isn't really about Vietnam. However, in my opinion, that seems to be a turning point. I suspect many of you served in Vietnam or had family and friends who did. Many of you likely protested the war and sang the songs we'll sing, hear, and hear about today. Although in the past year and a half we have seen large-scale national protests such as the Women's March, the Vietnam War protests were, I believe, the last time we saw large-scale protests against war, any war. Let's take a moment to reflect on that. Remaining seated, unless you feel moved to stand, let's sing Where Have All the Flowers Gone? The words are in your extra insert in your order of practice. If you do not feel like singing, feel free just to follow along with the words. authorization to use military force against terrorists, known as the AUMF, passed just 3 days after the 9/11 attacks. Congress believed it could be derived from the 1973 War Powers Act, thereby handing off both the ability and responsibility to declare war to the president. Now, without starting any partisan arguments here, we UUs were probably quite comfortable with this power being vested in the president during the Obama years, less comfortable during the George W. Bush presidency, and we are abjectly terrified of it at the moment. Presently, the United States has troops in harm's way each and every day in over a dozen countries around the world, one of which I had not even heard of. I cannot legitimately call these combat troops because that seems impossible to verify despite my best efforts. This list is not exhaustive. Afghanistan, Bahrain, Djibouti, Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, Niger, the Philippines, Poland, Qatar or Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Somalia, South Korea, Sudan, Syria, Ukraine, and Yemen. We have or have had troops also in Ethiopia, Eritrea, Georgia, and Kenya. In addition, naval troops patrol various so-called hotspots in the Black Sea, the Strait of Gibraltar. They also patrol near Saudi Arabia, near Japan, near Israel, and near North Korea. Maddow states, quote, with tax cuts in wartime, with no sense of collective national sacrifice on behalf of the war effort, with less than 1% of the American population taking up arms to fight, with U.S. casualties politically and literally shielded from public view, the cumulative effect was to normalize our national wartime. We became a nation, quote, within a quote, at peace with being at war, end quote, in the words of the New York Times media critic, David Carr. As I read Rachel's book, let's face it, we watch MSNBC, we all think of her as simply Rachel. I realized that my kids grew up with perpetual war. I remember taking a birthday cake to my friend's son stationed in Colorado Springs during the build-up to the first Gulf War, Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm, when my son was 5 or 6. My son was 17 and our daughter was 9 when the attacks of September 11 happened. We were at war before that, and we've been at war ever since. We have had American troops, boots on the ground, in one capacity or another, in Afghanistan for 16 years, 7 months, and 20 days. As of today. That is 6,076 days. Doesn't even make the news anymore. And as Vari pointed out, that's not the only place. My children have lived their entire lives at peace with perpetual war. They don't even know about it. Nor, frankly, do we. It's out there, but it's hard information to find. When I first started writing this, I wanted to ask why we let our voices of protest die. But as I researched and wrote, I realized that we didn't know there was anything to protest. I wanted to ask why we didn't pass our activism of the 60s and 70s on to our children and grandchildren, until I realized that we did. Just not about war. We taught them to be stewards of the earth, to work for, as our principles say, peace, liberty, and justice. We just didn't know that peace was much harder to find than we thought. We focused on civil rights, voting rights, poverty, immigration, and the countless other injustices staring us in the face every day. We didn't know this one was still simmering, but it was kept out of sight. Let's pause again and sing Bob Dylan's Blowing in the Wind. I promised you'd have to sing. The words are on the insert. Again, sit, stand, dance as you choose. Sing or simply follow along. Maddow suggests several solutions, most of them difficult, long-term, and far-reaching. Among them, she suggests doing away with the secret military. She says flying drone missions, vaporizing people in far-off places should be the job of the Air Force, and we should know about it. Stepping aside from her, about drone strikes. Even if they are 100% accurate, as we are led to believe, and even if they only target terrorists, imagine being awakened in the early morning hours by a huge explosion to find your neighbor's house blown to bits. How would you feel about the country that did that? All warm and fuzzy? We are creating a wave of bad will across the globe that we will have to live with for generations. Back to Rachel's suggestions. We should return the military to military things and eliminate the outsourcing of duties to contractors. She suggests returning the National Guard and Reserves to their intended purposes, where they live a primarily peacetime civilian life and are only called upon for active duty in the most dire of circumstances. And the two I most heartily embrace, getting the business of declaring war back to Congress where it was intended to be. And lastly, that going to war should be like it used to be. Something that affects the entire country from the very start, not the 1%, a very different 1% than we usually talk about, while the rest of us carry on with our lives untouched. Now, I said difficult, long-term, and far-reaching because all of these require massive changes to the Washington and military power structures. We all work hard to elect those who might take a similar view, but this is a heavy lift, and this could take decades. I think hers are worthwhile ideas, and I support them, but I was looking for something a little closer to home and a little more immediate. Elvis Costello asks in his 1979 recording of Nick Lowe's, "What's so funny about peace, love, and understanding?" So where are the strong? And who are the trusted? Where are the strong? And who are the trusted? I think we know where and who they aren't. Is it us? Should it be us? Could it be us? It won't be easy, I know, but we have a responsibility to find the news that's below the surface. We have to be our own reporters, dig deeper looking for the story. Wars aren't near as sexy or rating-producing as our commander-in-chief's latest inane early morning tweet storm, so you're not likely to find it on the TV news, whatever you watch. Your Facebook page, your internet newsfeed, or even in the New York Times. But it's all there. Rachel found it. I found it on my own. So can you. We are Unitarian Universalists. We do stuff. Big stuff. We always have. What's bigger than American servicemen and women dying in places we cannot pronounce when we never even knew they were there or why? What's bigger than a dozen secret wars across the globe using our tax dollars and our military? For what? We have a right to know. What's bigger than the United States leaving a footprint of destruction across the world in wars never declared that we Americans essentially slept through? Being at peace with perpetual war is not a good thing. We are Unitarian Universalists. We do stuff. If we don't speak out, who will?
Here.
Thank you. Please rise in body or spirit and join in singing Building a New Way, which I believe is actually hymn number 1017 rather than 1019, as it says in